Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Hello, future innovators and leaders. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Youth Global Health and Innovation Conference. My name is Meher Graywal. I'm a high school student at Interlake High School in Bellevue, and I'm also the director of Worth the Shot. We had a blast yesterday. It was an amazing day of ideas, innovation, new technologies, and how they can be inextricably interwoven with global health and medicine. And we're today really excited to present our esteemed speakers, scientists, leaders, and the greatest minds of medicine. And it's an honor to hear from them. So I would like to start off by introducing our team. Go ahead, Brian.
Hi, everyone. My name's Brian. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a second-year medical student at UW Seattle.
Thanks, Brian. Now off to Louise.
Hello, my name is Louise Martins. I'm a junior at Henry M. Jackson High School, and I am one of the organizers, co-organizers for Worth a Shot community, and I'm very pleased to all see you here today.
Thanks, Louise. And now Annika. Okay, no worries. And Chris. And that's Antonio. You want to go ahead?
Hi, morning, everybody. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Washington.
Thanks, Antonio. So before we get started, I just want to let all of you know that we do have the closed captions setting enabled on Zoom. So if you need it, feel free to enable it. So you can just click on the live transcript button and that will enable that. So with that, I'm honored to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Doug Paauw. He's a professor of medicine at UW Medicine. He's the director of medical student programs and the Rothman Family Foundation Endowed Chair for Patient-Centered Clinical Education. He is a model physician and teacher par excellence. Dr. Paauw has received the Distinguished Teaching Award multiple times. He has been voted one of the best doctors in America, Pacific region multiple times. And he has received the SGIM Clinician Teacher Award of Excellence. Welcome, Dr. Paauw. We are honored to have you, and over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited to get a chance to talk to all of you. You are all our future, and I think it's so important to have the passion you all have. And what I hope to do in talking with you a little bit is just to share some of my thoughts that I've accumulated over 30 years working with people in the medical profession, especially working with students at all levels, and some of the things that I wish I had known when I had started out. I would love it if folks have comments or questions too that they can put into the chat, that we can have a dialogue as well. But I just tried to come up with a few thoughts I had. One thing that I have learned, one of the most important things that I've learned is the more you say, the less they hear. So I'm trying to be focused on some things and just get a few topics out there that I think are really, really important. And I know that a lot of you probably, if you were like me, you kind of react to slides and PowerPoints kind of a negative way. I only have a few words on these. I promise they're not going to be too crazy. So I'm just going to share the screen here, and I'm going to go ahead and if I can figure out how to get this going. So I just had a few thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I think the first and most important one as you get started out is make sure whatever you choose to do, you're doing it for yourself. We are all in the field of medicine. We are all generally giving and we want to help others, but at the core, it has to be important to you. It has to be what gets you up every day. It gets you up in the morning. It makes you want to be part of that day, because it's really hard as we attack all these huge problems that you're discussing at this conference. And we look at all the difficulties the world is in right now. We are all resources to help solve the problems, but we have to be okay with it. We have to make sure it resonates with what we really care about. So the motivation has to come from yourself, deep inside of you, and be the right fit. It can't be for people that other people. It can't be for your parents. It can't be for your best friend. It can't be for your partner. It can't be for some idealized version of ourselves we see. It really has to be for who we are, because that's going to take care of us through the difficult journey we're going to have as we move into the field of taking care of others and solving some of these huge problems that are out there in the health of people all over the world. So make sure that the reason you're doing it is because it's what you really want to do. It's not for somebody else, it's for you. I think if there's one thing you remember from this that I'm going to share with you, it's this: please do not be scared to make mistakes. You're not going to learn if you don't make mistakes. And what I've seen in the last probably 5-10 years has been a real reluctance of students to speak up and to say what they believe, to be able to engage in the process, because I think people are so worried about, if you're not perfect, you won't achieve your goals. And especially in the medical field, we learn by engaging and by trying. We may not be perfect, we may goof up, but we learn so much from that. Our patients and our colleagues are incredibly forgiving of the mistakes we make. And if we aren't brave enough to engage and try and speak up and to be involved, we're just not going to learn. And that's so important. And I have a story I'm going to read you. It's a story about one of my medical students from, about 15 years ago. But I think it shows the spirit of being engaged and not backing off, and gives you a little bit of an idea of the power of that. And I think I just disconnected myself, so be with me. Just hang in here. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this student and the story. Shauna was my medical student when I took over Team C the first of the month. A day earlier, she had picked up a patient, a young woman, Kim, with portal vein thrombosis, who had been transferred to the UW hospital from Alaska. The senior resident on the team told me of the icy reception Shauna had received. Shauna was told by the patient that the patient didn't like her. She felt she did not know enough to be involved in her care, and she was annoyed by all the questions Shauna asked. The first day I saw the patient with Shauna, the patient tore into Shauna, telling her in front of me that she was incompetent and she was annoying. After we left the room, I asked Shauna if she would feel more comfortable if she followed a different patient on the team. She asked me a very good question. Shauna said to me, "Is becoming a doctor all about being comfortable?" She wished to continue in the care of the young woman. We quickly learned that Kim, the patient, had many reasons to be upset. Her portal vein thrombosis occurred in the period shortly after delivering her child. She was told in Alaska there was nothing more they could do for her, and that she would probably not live more than a few years. She arrived at the UW hospital and was told by the liver specialist that she could not be helped by a liver transplant. The liver transplant was the only hope she had clung to. Shauna told me she felt that she felt very abandoned by her doctors in Alaska, who referred to her to the UW. And even though Kim didn't like her, she didn't want to abandon her. I was touched by Shauna's dedication and commitment. The next morning on rounds, Kim again stated how much she disliked Shauna, how she felt she was incompetent, and how angry she was at the University of Washington. I asked Shauna again if she wanted to continue, and she was even more determined to try and help. The next morning was Kim, the patient's 21st birthday. Shauna entered her room quietly and put a bouquet of flowers by her bed. When Kim awoke, she awoke surrounded by her nurse, Shauna, and the rest of the team singing happy birthday to her, complete with the birthday cake that Shauna had ordered and bought for her. Kim cried and then smiled for the first time since arriving at the University of Washington. She gave Shauna a hug. She cried tears that had been ready to be released for weeks. When I returned later that morning to check on Kim, she told me how thankful she was that Shauna had not given up on her. She told me how scared she was of dying alone and of never seeing her baby again. She was so touched by Shauna's kindness to her when she felt that her treatment of Shauna was so cruel. She felt that today, her birthday, she was really seen as a person and not just an interesting medical case. And that was who she felt she was. From that day on, whenever we talked to Kim, she would always refer to Shauna as her doctor and wanted to make sure Shauna was in agreement with any plans the consultants or the team had. Kim left the hospital after a 2-week stay, returning to Alaska and to her baby. About a week later, a large box arrived at the 6th floor nursing station addressed to Shauna and Team C. I opened the box and found a package with a tag for Dr. Paauw residents and nurses. Then I found 6 packages, all with tags that said, for Shauna, my doctor. That seemed about right. I paid Shauna and had her come up to the floor to see this beautiful testimony to her caring. So this story, I think, exemplifies so many important things about entering the medical profession and the pact that we have with those who we take care of, that it's not about us. It's not about our own hurt feelings that sometimes happens when there are disagreements, or very often when people are just hurting. You know, people that hurt sometimes share their hurt with everybody. And this young student, very early in her career, got that, and got that maybe even more than I did at that point, because my goal was to try to make things easier for her, to try to make her not have a difficult experience, an experience that might be hurtful to her. You know, having a patient who was upset and angry, even though the student had done absolutely nothing to deserve anger and frustration. But Shauna really figured that out and stuck with it. And what ended up happening was beautiful. It was the ability for her to be seen as that patient's doctor and the one person that that patient really trusted, because she had proven herself to that patient by not abandoning her. And I think it gives us that great message of not being scared to make a mistake, not being scared to charge in there, even when the patient's going to be scrutinizing it and is already telling the student that they're making a mistake by being there. The student wasn't scared of that. And what ended up happening was more learning and a better, more rich experience than if the student had been careful and cautious and avoiding any kind of conflict. So I can't emphasize enough, don't be scared to make mistakes. Now, we don't try to make mistakes. I've made thousands and thousands and thousands of them in my career. One of the things I like to tell my students is the only difference between them and me is that I've had the opportunity to make a lot more mistakes than they have. And someday they'll be able to be at the same level I'm at, where they've made many, many mistakes and they get a chance to learn from them. So please be bold, be courageous. Don't be worried about what everybody else thinks about you. Give it your best, do your best. I think that's going to shine through a lot more than if we're correct or not when we open our mouth to share something, or when we do in our best attempt to take care of people. In all our friendships and all our relationships, we all make mistakes, but people still care about us. Another thing I wanted to share with you, which I think is really important, is always remember you are running a marathon, not a sprint. That as you start to put things together for your career, what you want to do in your career, it's a long road, and you need to have energy for that. You need to pace yourself, just like we do, like somebody who's running a longer race as opposed to a 100-yard dash where we just put all our energy and go full out. And I'm going to get to this in a minute. A lot of this has to do with self-care and figuring out how to make all this work for you. But remember, you want to pick careers that you can be in for a lifetime, something that's going to be part of you for your whole life. And when you're younger, you're trying everything on. You're finding, where is that really good fit? And remember that once you decide on a career, it's something over many, many years. You're not going to get there in one day. You're not going to get there in 1 month. You're not going to get there in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not even going to get there in 5 years or 10 years. So pacing yourself, figuring out how to make it all work for yourself is the most important goal. It's not getting there faster. And sometimes people, when they try to get somewhere faster, they become so focused on one thing that they miss the joy of the journey of getting there. So much of what's been important to me in my career and my life has been all of the memories I've made as I've gone along, all of the people I've met along the way, all of the people who have helped support me, and recognizing them. Many of them are not around anymore. As we age and get older, a lot of the people that matter to you are no longer on the earth. And we want to take the time to recognize, enjoy, and live in the moment with all these amazing people that we come into contact with. People are the most important resource there is. The people you work with, the people that you care for, if you're in medicine, your patients, the people that support you, the people that teach you lessons. Nothing else is as important. I think we get our values all messed up when we think resources are the most important. Well, that's true, because people are the most important resource. But so often in the field of medicine, resources are equivalent to money, with the idea that the more money we have, the more we can make things happen. There is a little truth to that, but I believe when our number one goal is acquiring monetary resources, we miss the most important thing, which is the people who are going to be really doing the healing, the people who are going to really be doing the changes that we need to do to make this world a better place, and especially to solve so many of the difficult problems that are in medicine today. And the most important person is you, that you really need to care for yourself, and you need to be caring for the people in your orbit that are really important, because nothing can replace you and can replace those people in your lives. It's so important that you make that a priority. Lots of other exciting things out there, lots of other mixed messages, but at the end of the day, that is the most important. Those are the most important resources there are. And I think this wonderful Maya Angelou quote, I absolutely love this quote. And this is so remarkably true. I've learned people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So I think the bottom line there is not that, our teaching and our connection with people is how we make them feel. Do we inspire people? Do we help people feel encouraged? Do we help people feel like they matter? All of those things help the people around you become the best version of them that they can be. And as we work on teams and we work on projects, remembering how important that is. Another thing I've learned over the years, and this was especially important as I started my medical school and medical residency, is happiness is tied to outcomes that exceed expectations. And sometimes I think we make such high expectations, not only for ourselves, but for whatever experience we're going to have. We have this huge expectation for ourselves or for what we're going to do, and then we're disappointed because we've built up an expectation so high. The flip side is disappointment is tied to when the expectations are so much greater than the outcome. When I started medical school, I went into it with the expectation that I hopefully would become a competent doctor, that I would be able to have my dream of becoming a physician. That's what I wanted. I didn't know what kind of physician I was going to become. I didn't know whether I would be working in a city or in a rural area. I didn't know if I'd be working in another country or in the United States. I didn't have all of those expectations. I just had a fairly simple expectation that I wanted to become a good doctor. I also had, my expectation was that it was going to be very hard and it was going to take a lot of time. And I actually didn't follow a lot of the advice that I've just given you. You know, I thought, well, I'm going to have to be studying all the time, and I'm going to have to kind of disappear from the world for 4 years while I'm in medical school. What was my surprise, and I think led to a lot of happiness for me, was I started with expectations that were so low as far as what I could accomplish in my own life and for myself, that when things were milder than I thought, I was so overjoyed by that. I felt like, wow, I have more time for myself. I have more time to be with people I care about, because I felt I was going to be off for 4 years and I wouldn't even see anybody. The flip side sometimes is difficult when people come in with the expectation for something that's a challenge, that they're going to have everything is going to be unchanged in their lives. When you embark on your field of study, things are going to change, and just be open to the journey that's going to be in front of you. Don't have it all figured out before you start the journey. The same was very true when I started my medical residency. I had heard rumors that, you know, we were on call every other night, all night, 24 hours. I'd be in the hospital for 36 to 38, sometimes 40 hours before I'd get home. And I did that every other or every third night in my first year of residency. And those were incredibly long hours. And I knew that. So I thought I might get a chance to sleep once in a while. I certainly won't be able to keep up my relationships. I'm just going to jump into this and I'm going to make it work. I was again shocked at how good people were to me, how much time people gave me off, and how people seemed concerned about my own development as a person. And so I had a lot more time than I expected. I thought, if you're on every third night, how many days off do you get? And I had residents that would be sacrificial. They would come in to cover all my patients and give me multiple days off a month, when I was told maybe I'd get 1 day off a month. And I had a very different experience over what my expectations were. And I remember just the joy in all when I had that time off, how joyful it was to me, because I never expected it. And I always wondered what it would be like if my expectations had gone in very different, and then the 3 or 4 days off I'd get a month, which is not a lot of time. I'm not recommending that for all of you, by the way. You know, in my day, it was 1 day off a month. Getting 3 or 4 days was 4 times what I expected. And I just remember how happy I was, because my expectation was so little and I felt I was given so much. So this is just something I've kind of learned with everything. When we go into things where we build up with such expectations, it's easy to get disappointed. When we go in with basic expectations about, I want to develop through this, I want to meet people that are really going to be important in my life, those type of expectations are very manageable and really work. If it comes down to, I want to work a 40-hour week, I want to have, 10 weeks of vacation a year, whatever, those type of expectations are often not met. I wanted to finish with a couple of quotes that I think these are pretty neat quotes, and I definitely agree with them. This is an Albert Einstein quote, and this isn't the type of quote I would have expected from Albert Einstein. I'd expect a quote from him that I wouldn't understand. A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness. And I think the part of this quote that resonates with me is, having worked with so many medical students and residents over the years, The people that are happiest are the ones that have a focus on their own development as opposed to what they're going to become. If they're like, I want to become a research cardiologist, that's a very specific goal. If they want to become the best doctor they can be, or if they want to become someone who can impact other people's lives through their concern for other people, those are more achievable than having such a finite goal that they're always worried about accumulating what they need to get into something unbelievably competitive. I'm all for people giving it their best, but I see so much more now of the restlessness. If I don't achieve this, then everything I want is gonna topple. Everything's gonna fall down. Everything's gonna break. And the reality is, our journeys in our lives are a whole bunch of serendipity. Things happen for a reason, but we can't plan what that is. We can put our best foot forward, but we don't have as much control as we think we do. We do have control of our attitude. We have control of how we want to spend our time, but we don't have control of every outcome. And I think sometimes people have way too much belief that if you just keep pushing as hard as you possibly can, you're going to get to the outcome you want. There's a lot more randomness in that. And what's much more important is that you focus on the person you're becoming. We go back to that Maya Angelou quote of how do you make the people around you feel? How do you support the people around you? Because that's going to be a greater key to success than always being the top, always being the winner, always being the person who is better than everybody else. Really, what we want to do is lift everybody up with us. We want to find people that are wonderful to be around, and we want to make sure they're all successful, and we will be successful in that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, as all of you are beginning your journey, is this wonderful Mark Twain quote: I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. That so much of what we learn is not in the curriculum. So much of what we learn that we need to become the person we want to be is experience. And some of it is failure, as I mentioned. It's learning from really difficult things that maybe hurt at first, but that is how we learn. And this is certainly how we learn to be teachers, because everything that I've done that's been a failure or a problem, a difficulty, I can share those lessons with my students. It's not the successes that I'm sharing, it's the things that I learned, boy, that didn't work. And so I think this is such a great quote, because our education is not all the coursework we take. It's learning new information, but experiencing the world. It's taking that new information and applying it. And sometimes it's kind of clunky and we goof up a lot when we do it, but those are our best teachers. So that's kind of the extent of my prepared remarks. I would love to hear from you. Any questions you have. Anything's fair game. You can ask me any question you want about my career. You can ask me about anything I've said. You can debate anything I've said. I love it when people debate. I think that's wonderful. I think we need more people sticking and saying, hey, you said something, but I don't totally agree with that because here's my take on it. I think that's wonderful. That's how we all learn.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Paauw. What a powerful and inspiring presentation. And I really loved the stories that you shared. It added a really personal touch to all the really important messages you shared with us today. So thank you so much for this. This is really incredible and inspiring. So one question, we have some questions here. So one of them is, do you have a specific experience along your pre-med journey that inspired you to go into medicine?
So I had a very kind of strange pre-medical journey. You know, I know many people very early in their life sort of feel called to the field of medicine. And you know, I wasn't. I mean, I think the thing when I was younger, what was most important to me was teaching. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad was a college professor. And so education was really important. I saw how much they loved their careers. They loved teaching so much. So that was something that I really, really, really was excited about. After college, I kind of stumbled on realizing that what the word doctor means is teacher. And I then realized that sort of the place where you could teach the most was working individually with people about their health. And so I kind of came to it from a very different approach, which was the ability to educate and share knowledge with people and having them share it with me, and recognizing that helping people learn about their health is what we do as doctors.
Another question thank you, Dr. Paauw. And another question we have here is, what are some qualities that you feel are important for a physician to have, and how would you suggest young people develop these skills?
So I think that I think the most important quality that a physician can have is being humble. We go into the field of medicine, and there is so much we don't know. There's so much dramatically more that we don't know than we know. I mean, and it's gotten more challenging in that way since I've become a physician, because back in the 1980s, when I was in medical school, the amount of knowledge in the field of medicine was still huge, but it was so much less than now. I mean, we just what we've learned in genetics and where we're moving there with understanding how we can figure out what medications are more likely to work for people, being able to have targeted therapies for people, things that we didn't really have. And the numbers are huge in the treatments that we have, as well as even the new diseases that we're learning about. So being humble to realize what we hopefully are good at as physicians is understanding people and understanding how we can be a conduit of information to people, and always learning it on our own. And so, my view is we really have no place for arrogance in the field of medicine, that we are just servants to bring information to people and to walk that journey with them. So as we get ready for this, it's really practicing being humble. And again, that's where I think making mistakes is a good thing. Nothing teaches you about being humble better than screwing up and making mistakes. There's nothing that teaches us better about our own limitations than when we don't do things to the standard that we want to do them to.
Well, thank you, Dr. Paauw. I think this is such an important message, especially today. So the next question follows onto this one. So I think there's, especially among young people today, there's a lot of an expectation of complete certainty, and a lot of young people would like to always be able to understand everything and figure everything out. So what advice would you give to young people in that context?
Yeah, it's one of the things in medicine that's such a challenge, is that's not medicine at all. That I think math and physics works a lot better for that. There are fields of science where there are absolutes. In medicine, I kind of we kind of have guidelines. We have usually the patient that has an illness will kind of look like this, but often they don't. And so sort of that idea of everything has to fit perfectly doesn't really work very well. That we have to be okay with understanding that things don't fit perfectly.
Mm-hmm. We have one more question before I'll hand it off to Louise for some other questions. So Dr. Paauw, how do you think that we can help dismantle some of the stereotypes about going into medicine? Like, as you described, feeling like you might have to disappear from the world for 4 years. I think that this is really important among young people today, so that they can understand what medicine really is.
Can you repeat that? I got disconnected. I was trying to
No worries.
I was trying to demonstrate mistakes for you.
So what I was saying, Dr. Paauw, is that I think that there are a lot of stereotypes about going into medicine, and I think, as you described, feeling like you will have to disappear from the world for 4 years. So how do you think that we can help address some of those stereotypes and um, really show young people what medicine really is all about?
I think we have to know what we want to get out of it. And obviously it's not an easy journey. I mean, medical school is a lot of information that you pick up, and you got to learn basic science so that you can interpret all the information you get from patients. It's not a goal of learning everything clearly, but we learn that, and that takes some time and a lot of effort. What I think has been problematic that I've seen in the last decade has been that I think our students feel like they have to be everything all the time, that they work so hard, they are learning all this information, and then in every free minute they have to be volunteering because, the idea that if you haven't done enough for your CV, you can't achieve in the field of medicine. And it just keeps pushing people where they don't have time to build their key relationships that they're going to need to endure. And so I guess I'd say I think it's a little bit of not a true thing that we can't take time for ourselves, that we can't be building our relationships that are going to sustain us. And the more time you spend with people as opposed to things, you become expert in people. And that's what being a doctor is about. It's being expert in people. And how do you reach people? How do you help people become healthier? And you need to be able to communicate with people in a way that they trust you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Paauw, for and I think I'll hand it over to Louise for the next question.
The next audio question is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic changed your view on the practice of medicine?
So that's a good question. So, I've known since I went to medical school that we were going to face a pandemic at some point. I mean, it just seemed like we were lucky that we hadn't gotten anything really terrible. But I did a lot of reading on the 1918 influenza pandemic and how it changed society. And for any of you that want to kind of learn a lot about COVID, read about that. There's a wonderful book called The Great Influenza that will teach you about it, and you'll see everything that's happening now is a perfect repetition of that, and it affects society in a lot of ways. So how does it affect medicine? Well, it's been an overwhelm of a broken system. Our medical system has been broken for many years, and it's needed to be fixed. And the stress test was COVID-19. So overworking lots of people in the medical profession, especially our nurses, our medical assistants, obviously lots of physicians. And what's happened is the approach for so many people has been to leave the medical profession. 20% per year have been leaving the profession, and that's a pretty crazy number. And so how does it affect me? Well, I try to look and say, what are the important things? How do I take care of myself through this? How do I get lessons from this? And how do I put that into something that's actually progress? And what has mattered in it? Well, what we've learned from it that's been a good thing is we've learned how important public health is. We've learned that public health saves so many lives, and it couldn't have been demonstrated better than the COVID-19 pandemic. And it showed how woefully prepared we were because we have been breaking the infrastructure of public health. We haven't been investing in it for a long time. On the individual basis with patients, it shows us how important strong doctor-patient relationships are so that we can have trust, so that when true scientific knowledge is there, our patients trust us in it. They don't immediately not believe us because they're hearing everything else that might be out there. So I take those as important lessons for me. But yeah, it's been a real strain on the system in a big way.
Thank you for your wonderful response. I'll pass it now to Brian, who will also ask another audience question.
Hi, Dr. Paauw. Thank you so much for this presentation as well. I really wish I had something like this when I had started medical school. It was definitely a refreshing perspective. So the question I have is, what has been your biggest personal challenge in your medical career, and how did you overcome it?
I love that question. I think probably the biggest challenge that I had was pretty early in my career. I had a good idea of what I wanted to do, but there was no room for it. I wanted to teach and I wanted to take care of patients. And I was starting to move down a path that would lead to not teaching and not taking care of patients long term, that there was no road for me. And there was a period of time where I actually believed there was no road for me, because there were no such things as clinician educators, clinician teachers in those days, that the only way you could stay in an academic center where there were students is to do research and fund your own research, which would have taken me away from patients, which is what I wanted to do. So I started to look into careers that were not what I wanted to do. And I just always thank myself that it didn't feel right. And so I backed off it, and I just was a little more patient, and then the paths opened up for me. And eventually I was the first person at the UW in the clinician educator pathway to actually showed up the year that I needed to start my work. And I guess the bottom line on that was patience. You know, I felt something was wrong and I didn't go forward with something that felt really wrong. And it was scary because I was worried about being unemployed. What would I do if I didn't have a job? I needed to have some kind of a job. And I didn't settle for something that I didn't want. And you know, the universe opened and I got something that I wanted. And it was kind of, I don't know if it was just lucky, but it told me, big challenge, you got to stick with what's important to you. That should be your guiding light.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll pass it on to Antonio now.
Hi, Dr. Paauw. Nice to see you.
Hey, Antonio. Good to see you.
Full disclosure, I've worked as a student with Dr. Paauw in the past. Question from the audience. You spoke a little bit about your path to medical school. I think this question is asking a little bit about your path to primary care. So what was the most powerful thing that attracted you and kept you engaged in primary care?
I think one of the most important things once I decided I want to be a doctor is I wanted to be people's doctor. I wanted to have long-term relationships and be somebody's doctor. That was my identity, was that I would be somebody's doctor, that we would be together in that journey. And so that fit with primary care. It fit with long-term relationship with being somebody's doctor. And that was something that, starting my first year of internship, I had a clinic at Harborview, and I just loved my patients. I couldn't wait to see them, and started a relationship with them that for some of them is now 35 years. So I never wavered on that, because my goal was I wanted to be somebody's doctor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paauw. I think that's all the time we have for questions today, but thank you so much for your time and for sharing these incredible stories. We're so grateful to you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much for the opportunity to talk to all of you, and all good luck, and hang in there, because we need you.
Thank you.